וכי נפשי es Hashem. Today we're going to study page 39, Lamentet, Tractate Shabbat. We're going to focus on the Hilchot Bishul, all the halakhot involved with cooking on Shabbat, different level of cooking, different option of cooking, when is permissible, when is forbidden, in which way we can basically do things that it's b'diavad okay. Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom of page 38b. Ibayalu gilgel mai. We discussed in a Mishnah situation that the egg was put next to the hot pot, and as a result the egg was cooked. Now the problem is it's called yitgalgel, which means the egg was cooked but was indirect cooking, which means so far what we said, that there is a concept of bishul, which was one of the 39 melachot, 39 type of work that forbidden on Shabbat. And the question is bishul b'shi'ur mu'at, which means you cook something but not in a full cook. As you know, egg, you can eat it almost fresh, a little cook, and full cook. So some eggs, even you put it with the chamin, with the chont, and it's even overcooked, and it's mitztamek v'yafelo. So the question is, this type of cooking is forbidden by rabbinic law, or it's part of the bishul, the cooking that forbidden mideoraita, from the Torah? That's the way, by the way, the Khatam Sofer understand Rashi. Amar Rav Yosef gilgel chayav chatat. Rav Yosef said the sin offering that basically for violation of biblical prohibition, it's applied to a situation like that. In other words, if a person cook an egg partially, he violated a biblical law. Now there is several points we need to elaborate. There is a concept that it's called Toladat Or. The Ritva, the Ran, Chazon Ish too, they have a lot to tell us about Toladot Or. Toladot Or meaning, for example, if I put an egg and wrap it with a hot clothing that was outside, its subsequent is derived from a prohibition of cooking. The same apply putting aside next to a pot. I am not cooking it directly, it is next to something. So therefore the process of cooking, it's considered Toladat Or. So the question is, do we take it as a cooking that forbidden from the Torah, meaning cooking its direct connection to fire, or we say it's a rabbinic, like bishul betoladot or, cooking by something derivative from cooking. So here is the issue. Since egg, unlike other food, become better by gilgul, which means by indirect derivative of cooking, which means for the egg to be at least partially cooked, it's enough if you put the egg next to some pot and touch to the walls of the pot, or indirect connection to a heating system to be cooked. So therefore, Eglei Tal, Khatam Sofer, Chazon Ish, and many others hold it as basically equivalent to putting something and cooking it, versus other type of cooking that it's not considering mevashel, it's not considering a cook process until it's at least reach a point of ma'achal ben drosai. For those who are not familiar, ma'achal ben drosai, as we said many times, is any type of food that was cooked either by 1/3, which is the minimum amount of time to cook that food, or by the Rambam and Ravid by half of the needed for cook that food. So that's basically the foundation of the Chatzi Melacha, or half of the process of cooking. Amar Mar Brei de Ravina Af Anan Nametanina. We learn later in the Mishnah, page 145b later. What we learn, כל שבא בחמין מלפני השבת, שורין אותו בחמין בשבת. Here we're speaking about salted food. Salted food, not necessarily or only salt, can be tavlinim, can be something that relate to a spicy or something that carry with spice, that if they have, which again we discuss here, bishul, some type of cooking. Rashi tells us that any type that that was connected to water before Shabbat, it's already, we can go ahead and put it back, soak it with hot water even on Shabbat. Let me share with you word by the Rambam, הלכות Shabbat, chapter 22. כל שבא בחמין, בין אם מתבשל קודם השבת, בין אם נשרה בחמין לפני השבת, מותר להשרותו בחמין בשבת. Anything that was basically placed in the water or cooked before Shabbat, one may soak it with the water even on Shabbat. Later in the Mishnah, Kuf Mem Hey, they said, כל שבא בחמין, and Rashi said, כלומר, שנתבשל. Over there in my book, in כלומר, I elaborate in Kuf Mem Hey, but basically, here, as long as it was Tarnegola de Rabbi Abba, which means that it was made, is prepared in advance, we can put it back. Tosfot, however, said something important. He said that they have to have mevushal kol tzorko mibeod yom, that the food need to be cooked in such a level that it's basically fully cooked or made cooked in a full manner, that you can serve it in advance. Can call it in our language 100% or 80% or 75%. But Tosfot hold that if it's not fully cooked, you cannot put it back and soak it with the water per Shabbat. And by the way, the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Yudchet 318 also hold the same as the Tosfot. However, some of the Rishonim hold that as long as they have the level of Ben Dorsai, it's 1/3 or half, it's enough, like the Rashba. And they hold that not just that they said even lechatchila you can go ahead and soak it with the water on Shabbat. But again, Egleital said that when we're dealing with this type of process, he said all of that, even it's a Isud Rabbanan, even it's a rabbinic, it's basically dealing with a level of Ben Drosai, which is a half or 1/3. Otherwise, you enter the domain of violation of Torah laws. But anyway, all of them hold something very important, that we should always never misconstrue what they said. Putting it directly, I repeat it, directly on the fire, everyone said that you cannot do it. Even some food that it's fully cooked in advance before Shabbat, putting it directly on a fire is forbidden by everyone, if it's not bederech hazara, which means you intend, you pull it out and you intend right away to return to the. But it's also another important thing I want to emphasize. We're speaking here about dry cooked food, not something that it's a liquid, that it's cold, because then it's an issue that we cannot put it in a clear rishon in the first vessel until we take it off the fire. Anyway, v'chol shelo ba bechamim lifnei השבת, like dry meat, medichin oto bechamim b'Shabbat. We can put hot water on the top of that on Shabbat, but we cannot leave it with the hot water. That's the concept. It's called hadacha, which means that you're preparing the food to be ready to eat it. So it's we here differentiate between soaking it with water, that is some type of cooking, versus just do the final preparation of the food in order to serve it. So he said, "Chutz min hamaliach yashan." There are several exceptions. So one, it's chutz min hamaliach yashan, that it's old salted fish. That's something that it's old fish from last year. I don't know how many people can eat that, but all right. Vekol yasa ispenin. It's like a tuna fish that came from Spain. Again, that it's very soft fish, and if you put the salt, it's so salty that you don't need anything. You just need a dacha. Dacha is like the final touch before you're serving it. Consequently, what we understand, we learn שהדחתן זו יגמר מלאכתן שמע מינה, which means that rinsing it with hot water itself is a completion of the prohibition of cooking, which means the minute you rinse it with hot water, it's not require any additional cooking. So the same applies to egg. That was slightly cooked. So it's the minute it's slightly cooked, it's already changed the status. It's some type of cooking. So we learn basically that putting even egg aside to a cook pot, it's considering bishul from the Torah, and you cannot do it. Again, in a sense of halacha lemaaseh, later we practice halacha, but just to get the point is, if it's something that was baked in a level of ben rusai, we allow to return to the fire for sure on Friday, but if it's Shabbat, it's a serious issue. In other words, the situation that we allow hachzara, in other words, if it was a fully intent to return the product, applied to a certain condition, such as you intend to do it, such as you are fully cooked the food in advance, etc. Learn in the Mishnah, ולא יבקיענה בסודרים. You should not break the eggs בסידורים. Some clothing that was heat in a fire, so outside by the sun. And Rabbi Yossi allow, he said that the prohibition of cooking, it's applied specifically in a fire, or something that is a toladota, or that is subsequent or indirect derivative from fire, but not direct, in other words, not directly with the fire, or not directly with the sun. So now we juxtapose to other Mishnah, that we say that you can take a pit that is no water there, and you put a cooked food. That's the ancient time, that's the way they put things. Remember in the story of Joseph in the biblical, he told the Egyptians how to observe the food. They knew that it's going to be a years of famine, so he told them, he invented the idea that you put underground sealed food, and that way preserve for a long time, and it turns later when the Egyptians have a starvation, Joseph, the biblical Joseph, asked them to do what? To open those storage room and serve. So in that sense, in the ancient time, they used to take a cooked food and put it in a pit that has no water, in order that in those days that they want to make sure that the cooked food will not carry any bad odor because of the heat. The same apply, ve'et hamayim hayafim bara'im, which means you take a water that it wasn't clean, like mikveh water that was used, and you can combine a vessel that is filled of water, that drinking water, in order bishvil shitzanenu, in order for the good water, meaning the drinking water, that cooled down. Later we explain why we need it. Ve'et hatzonen bachama, and also water or cooked food that it's cold in the sun, bishvil sheyechamu. So in other words, you're taking out of the freezer nowadays a frozen food, and if it's a hot summer time, and you can pull it out of the freezer and leave it outside, in order for that to be ready to eat that food. Again, we're not talking about eggs, we talk about frozen food, okay? Leima, meaning that Mishnah that tells us that you can cook with a direct heat from a sun on Shabbat, goes by Rabbi Yossi hi velo Rabbanan, which means it goes by the opinion earlier we mentioned of Rabbi Yossi and not Rabbanan that disagree. Amar Rav Nachman, Bachama de kulam alu pligi de share, betolot haru kulam alu pligi de asir. If we need to cook in the sun, everyone agree that even lechatchila, even the way that it can be at the first place, it's not a problem, and even it's not even a rabbinic violation. Betoldot ha'or, but if you take something that it's derivative from the fire, everyone said that it's forbidden because it's considering a cooking. Kiplige, what's the real controversy? Betoldot hachama, like a clothing that was heat in the very hot summer. Why? Mar Savar, one of them, when they said Mar Savar, they're not sure which one, but they knew that they disagree, okay? So one of them hold that even it's not considering a cooking from the Torah, Gazrinan Tuldot hachama atu Tuldot ha'or. We put a decree that you cannot cook in subsequent of the heat because of the subsequent of the so in order for people not to mix between the two, meaning they put the boundaries so people who are not educated or people not familiar will not mix something that was cooked directly by fire versus something that cooked indirectly by the fire that come out of the natural sun. Umar Savar lo gazrinan, that he allowed to cook something that is coming out of the sun, but since everyone agreed that you can cook or indirect derivative cooking by using a sun, which means that the Mishnah goes by everyone. In other words, what's the real fear? The real fear is that people will not familiar will think that you go ahead and you cook it directly with the fire, while they don't understand that it wasn't like that. What you did is basically you use the natural sun, okay? So since you don't know, and people and bishul and cooking, it's biblically prohibited. That's the issue. So how about if Rabbi Yossi also disagree with that? Because why he did not disputed this point the same way as he disputed earlier, or why he agreed with that point? Rabba Amar Gzeira Shema Yatmin Beremetz. The fear is that he mixed ashes with a coil, that if people cook on Shabbat by putting the food, combining with a hot sand, imagine if it's a desert of Africa, okay? It's extremely hot. You take uncooked food, you put it in a box, light box, you dig in the ground, and you leave it there. Guess what's going to happen?
Cooked.
It's cooked, right? So people will understand that you can do hatmana. Remember we said wrapping with the blankets? That you can do hatmana on Shabbat. Because they said, so what's the difference between this and the other? It's all allowed. People are not educated, they don't differentiate. So therefore the rabbi said you cannot cook by putting the food on the ground, even it's considering toladat chama, that it's not you put directly with the sun, it's a subsequent of the sun. In other words, the ground will not be hot without the original heating that comes from the sun. So it's a derivative. Tolada, as we said, is derivative. Rav Yosef Amar, Mipnei shemeziz afar mimkomo. I have a different reason why I said it's not allowed. You know why? Because you take the ground, you take the dust, and you remove it. and you cannot do that on Shabbat. So Rashi said that because it wasn't enough dust that was taken in order to put the eggs. Tosfot goes a little differently, but one of the issue here is the issue of tiltul muktzeh. You're taking something that we cannot carry and you carry it, and there is others that the whole idea of in order for that to be cooked. So it's different opinion what exactly the problem. But my beinayu, what's the real difference in the point of halacha between the two? Ika beinayu, in regards to putting egg, afar tichoach, to put it in the dust, hot dust that is soft. Okay, so Rashi here they use the word klomar, and he said klomar tichoach ba'omek delek lamechesh meizes. I wrote in my book a long article over that Rashi. It's above this scope of the study today. I just give you abbreviation. There is a Ran, there is a Ritva, there is a Pnei Yoshua dealing with this issue. You have here 2 points that Rashi used klomar. He said tichoach ba'omek, that it's digging deep. Rashi meant that the problem with tichoach is either because we have a decree that maybe he combined it with the remets, which means that it's that decree that he is basically somehow derivative of cooking, and therefore he needs to put it in a level that it's a very deep in order to make it happen, or because of Rav Yosef that he's removed a dust from its place, which means he holds that you can put an egg with a soft dust because you don't have the issue of moving the dust. So the one it's called melechet choresh, which is plowing on Shabbat. One is the issue, you see, each one of them has different issue with this. One is the issue of cooking, one is the issue of moving something that it's muktzeh, one is the issue of plowing on Shabbat, but it's all boiled down to the afar tichoach, that it's a different here between Rabbi and Rav Yosef. What's exactly the gzera? What's the reason? Meitivei, we ask about Rav Yosef from the Mishnah. The next one, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel umegalglim betzal gag roteach, which means you can put an egg and on the top of a roof that it's hard and it's basically toladat chama, ואין מגלגלים ביצה על גבי סיד רותח. Right? So Rashi said, because if it's a בישול בתולדות חמה, if it's cooking by subsequent of the sun, it's one issue. But there are others who say that it's again, the big question is if it's a direct cooking, direct form of heating it, or indirect. Bishlama leman de'amar, if we go by the Rabbah, that is forbidden putting an egg in the ground. Why gzera shema yatmin beremetz, that he hold, because you allow one thing, a person can do much more. A person can put the food in the remetz, leika lemigza. Why? Because if you talk about a hot roof, since a person did not put the egg on the top of the roof and he just leave it there, so Rabban Shimon Gamliel said that you can do it on Shabbat. Ela leman de'amar. However, if you go by Rav Yosef, that he said mipnei shemaziz afar lemkomo ligzar, that Rabban Shimon Gamliel forbid because you cannot cook or roasted egg on the top of the roof, because he may move the dust that at the top of the roof, which means he will do some type of preparations. Tosfot said, in order to make it happen. So the Gemara responds, Stam gag leid be'afar. Usual roof doesn't have this issue of dust, that he collecting dust and moving it from one location there. In time of the Talmud, most of the dust was made out, most of the roof made out of different materials that what we see today. You know, they don't have, and what he meant by that is there is a dust or earth on the top of the roof, but it wasn't something that you can pull it out, afar talush. Tashma, we ask the question of Rav Yosef from the last part of the Mishnah. מעשה שעשו אנשי דבריו הביאו סילון תוספות לתוך המה של חמין. Remember the story of Tiberius, that they put the cold water on the heart, and the sages they said that if it's come from outside to inside, so it's like you made it on Shabbat, and you cannot on Shabbat, not festival, cannot drink it, and cannot bath on that. Bislom, this is good by the Rabbah, that he said that Rabbi Yossi agreed that you cannot put the egg in the ground on Shabbat. Gzera shama yatmin beremetz. So we understand Hanu the damir atmana, which means that it's the same as atmana, that the same way that you put the cold water with the hot water, that the sages forbid it, the same thing applied to putting it in the ground, or because the same gzera shama yatmin beremetz. Ela leman damar. But if you go by the Rav Yosef, that the reason that they forbidden nation is if you tell me by Rav Yosef, they said that you remove the dust from one location to another, how you explain the story of the people in Tiberius? But because according to what he said, it's nothing to do with the putting the water and combining it. Is nothing to do with the hatmana, with putting the food in the ground on Shabbat. One thing has nothing to do with the others. So they said, Misavar ma'aseit ve'aseifa kai, areisha kai. So he said, the story of the Tiberius it's applied to the first part of the Mishnah. How? Because the first part of the Mishnah we said le'afkiana b'sedarim, which means you cannot take the egg and break it at the top of the clothing that was hit by the sun. Ve'Rabbi Yossi matir, and Rabbi Yossi allow it. So the story of the Tiberius people is brought by the first Tana, which is the sages, as a proof to their opinion that you cannot cook with a subsequent of something that was hit by the sun. That's what the sages said. The story of Tiberius, the story of cooking in Tiberius, the Toldot Chamau, that is the hot spring that come in Tiberius, and therefore the sages forbids they use that water. So he responds, Amar lehu, he said, Hahu, the story of Tiberius, Toldot uhu. It's a subsequent of a heat, but it's not subsequent of the sun. The Halfei apitcha de Gehinom. That this spring, it's in a sense, it's go by the Gehinom. Gehinom meaning it's a literature that said that the hell, the Gehinom, it's like a hot place. So it's like very, very hot. So let's wrap up what we understand so far. What we understand is, number one, Bishul, cooking by fire or subsequent to the fire, is forbidden by the Torah. Point one. Cooking by the sun, natural sun, it's permissible even lechatchila. Meaning, frozen food in a freezer, in a hot summer, you put it outside in the sun, you allow. The big issue is toldot chama. Toldot chama we explain, like you're taking the egg, you wrap it with hot clothing. According to Chachamim, according to Tanakama, it's forbidden even by the rabbinic. Why? Because people mix between toldot chama, the toldot ha'u, between fire and the sun. Rabbi Yossi allow, and the last one, Rabbi Yossi allow if you put the egg in the ground, that it's heated by the sun. So he said that the Rabbah hold that we are forbidden because Gzera shema yatmin beremetz. But the other Rabbi Yosef, he doesn't hold like that. So basically what we learn this part is that you cannot cook toward the hatmana. In other words, lo levashel derech hatmana. You cannot cook by putting it in the ground and wrap it up in the ground and use it that way. Either by Rashi, that is chafirat guma, that you plowing under the ground, or by Tosfot, that he said that you metaltel muktzeh, that you're moving something that you cannot carry. But that apply only for the dust or sand or something like that. And the story of the people on Tiberias, it's an issue of bishul, of cooking by subsequent of the sun or subsequent of the fire. Depend if you go by the sages, is by the sun or by the fire, by Rabbi Yossi. Amar Rav Chizda. Another point by the story of people in Tiberias. ממעשה שעשו אנשי טבריה, we are 39b. ממעשה שעשו אנשי טבריה ואסרו לרבנן, בטלה הטמנה בדבר המוסיף הלבל ואפילו מבעוד יום. So from the story, by the action performed by the people of Tiberias, and the fact that the sages prohibited them from using the water, the conclusion is that the practice of inserting a pot in something that increased the heat over the course of Shabbat was abolished on Shabbat. Not only it's prohibited to do it on Shabbat itself, but it's also mi'ba'od yom, even during the day, still day before Shabbat. So running pipes of cold water through hot water is similar to putting water in something that add heat. So the Rashba and Pnei Yoshua hold here that it's like the third view. You remember we talk about something that add more smoke, like Mosif Hevel. So because in the story of Tiberias they do it toward the direction of the general hot water, and the water came out from the other side and not combined with the general spring water. So it's the issue here is hatmana. So how halacha lema'aseh? What's happened in the final word? Amar Ula halacha ke'anshei Tveria. So Ula said halacha is according to people in Tiberias. So not like the sages that forbids the water, and like the so basically what the Ula said, it's something that many rabbis were not so happy, because he basically allow to cook in toladot chama. אמר לרב נחמן, כבר תברינו אנשי טבריה לסילוני הוא. Even the people in Tiberias already backed off. So Shulchan Aruch Shin Kavav said that that's basically the halacha, he can do it, but it's just part of the discussion. מעשה שעשו אנשי טבריה, so the sages said to them, if it was Shabbat, so it's the same as water that cook on Shabbat, that you cannot use it for what? For drinking or for bathing. Mai rechitza, what type of bathing that the sages forbid? Ileima, if you said rechitzat kol gufo, that's applied to wash the entire body, it's hard to say. Why? Ela chamin shu chamu b'Shabbat hu de'asurim. Which means what you forbid is basically water that heated on Shabbat itself. Ha-chamin shu chamun be'erev Shabbat mutarim. But if you prepare in advance hot water and you use it on Shabbat, you allow. As a side note, the great Rav Ovadia Yosef, in one of his books, explained that in a practical halacha, if you have a tub that you prepared in advance, Avadia Yosef, you know, it's a Sephardic previous former chief rabbi of Israel. I used to go to him 25 years ago. We are like almost like a friend. But anyway, Avadia Yosef said that if you have a hot water prepared in advance before Shabbat, and it's like in a tub at the top of the roof, or at the top of the boiler room, or the attic, okay? And you have a pipe that coming out, and you open the pipe and you use it on Shabbat. So again, you do not heat anything on Shabbat. It's advanced preparation of that hot water. So he said you can wash. Yes.
So why we can't use hot water on Shabbos from the house? Because there is already existing fire from the boiler, which is warming the kettle. No. Sorry, my friend Bill. It's incorrect. We have few experts here, so you can help us. Come on,
the hot water that you're buying in Home Depot or Lowe's, right? Big or small. How the process when you open the forest and you're ready to use it on Shabbat, how the process take place? No, Reb David, tell us.
Well, it's cold first.
No?
Well, the problem is as soon as you take some of the water out of the tank, then more cold water is going to go in there and it'll start heating up.
Problem one.
And then
Problem
it'll be
two.
mixed with the water that's in there, so any subsequent water coming out of that tank is water that was heated on Shabbat.
Problem. Okay, what else? There's other problems. Tell us about the process. How exactly the process take place? When you have this hot heater, you place this in your attic or basement or whatever it is, all right? You connected it to what? How it works?
To cold water comes in there.
Right, but how the process works? Tell us what exactly happened.
Well, there's a heating coil that it depends whether it's gas or electric.
Let's start with the gas.
The gas one, well, there's basically there's a pilot light that would then ignite the and there'd be a transfer of flame.
Do you hear that? Okay. What is the electric problem?
Well, so it's going to cycle because it cycles on and off.
You hear the problem?
But electric is a thing what being there. Electric is something you cannot see. It's always there.
Yeah, but the problem is you basically heating it.
So that's the difference.
What Rabbi Ovadia Yosef said, let's make it clear. He's not speaking in any form of hot water that you have any type of system, neither gas nor electric. He speaks about hot water, like for example, people who use mikveh, people who duck in the water. There are people, Hasidim does that every day. There are people who does that on Shabbat, etc. So they have some fastidious people that will not go in the freezing cold February, right, to a cold water, right? I remember when I was in service, part of the training, we need to swim in February in Athlete, close to Haifa. It's a zero, maybe below zero water. Crazy, make you sick if you're not trained. But there are people who cannot go to a mikveh on Shabbat if the water is not at least warm. They do not like to duck themselves in a cold water. I don't mind, but most of the people does care to go in the winter to somehow warm water. Now, many people on Shabbat does not take a shower. Okay? Now, since the shower is a cold shower, and you don't use a cold shower, so you basically go on Shabbat to a mikveh that it's warm. How do you warm the mikveh? Right? You see? So, if for example Rabbi Ovadia Yosef said, as an example, you have a water that prepared in advance, in a very hot temperature, okay? You observe them in a special vessel that hold the heat for a long time. You do not use neither electric nor gas for the sake of understanding, okay? We're not talking about mikveot, some of them that carried inside the mikveh some type of how you call that, inside the mikveh, that you keep the water hot.
No, yeah, like a heat coil.
Heat coil. We're not talking about heat coil. Let's trace a situation that you have the water that was made in such a walls that observe the heat for a long time. Okay? So you heat the water in advance. The mikveh is now warm. It's not as hot as was before Shabbat. At 4:30, you make it so hot that no human can go in, full of smoke. You wrap it up. It's observed that. Now it's Shabbat morning, since the mikveh was open. Shabbat morning, it's warm. It's not so hot, but people can duck in the mikveh and feel comfortable with the water. Rav Ovadia Yosef came in and said, you can go ahead and use it. The Chebiner Rav, they said that once he was in Yerushalayim, the Chebiner Rav studied Chavrusa with Rav Meshulam Rat, which is my wife's grandfather. But anyway, he was one of the giant scholars in Israel in those days. So the story goes that the Chebiner Rav on Saturday, on Shabbat morning, he went to the mikveh, and he went down on the steps, you know, and he realized that the water is hot, and he dressed up and he didn't duck himself and walk out of the mikveh. So his student understand, as a tremendous Torah scholar, that he wasn't happy with the idea that the mikveh is hot, which means that the water are hot. So what we understand here, when we said chamin shu chamu b'Shabbat da'asurim, that's you speak about something that was heated on Shabbat. Ha-chamin shu chamu me'erev Shabbat mutarim. But if it's a water that was heated on Friday in advance, it's okay. V'atanya, we learn in the Braita, chamin shu chamu me'erev Shabbat למחר רוחץ בין פניו ורגליו, אבל לא כל גופו. We learn in different Braita that if you have a hot water that it's prepared in advance on Friday, you can use it the next day for what? To washing your face or legs, but not the entire body. Which means, what we derive from that, that the rabbis forbade using the entire body with the hot water, even the hot water prepared in advance. It was, I'm not going there because it's a long subject, but it's called Gzerat HaBalabnim or Gzerat HaMerchatzaot, that they put for public bathing place, a special decree in those days. I'm not going there. Ela panav yadav veraglav. The Mishnah speaks only about washing face, hand and leg with the water that was prepared on Friday. Eima Seifa, look at the end of the Mishnah. What did he say in the end of the Mishnah? B'yom tov kechamin shu chamu b'yom tov v'asurim berchitza umutarim b'shtiya. If you talk about a festival, so festival you hold different, that on festival you can cook in order to eat it the same day. It's called melechet ochel nefesh. But it's come to washing the body, you cannot wash the body with the water that was heated on Yom Tov, right? So Pnei Yoshua and Milchamot Hashem, etc., they all hold that the big chidush in the Mishnah, that people on Tiberias, so they said that it's not applied to water that was prepared in advance. So they said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, so he said, Lemat Tnan Stama. So what we understand only that it's applied to facial, hand and legs, and not the entire water, and you forbid to do it in the water that was heated on the festival. So that's the idea of Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel disagree. Leimat nan stama, if you say that Mishnah hold ke Beit Shammai, that's the idea of Beit Shammai, that the Mishnah speaks about Tiberias people. It's that 9 we learn in the Tractate Beitzah, page 21. Beit Shammai אומרים lo yachem adam chamin le raglav, a person should not prepare water that it's for his feet, ela im ken reuyim leshtiya, only if that water is ready also for drink, which means you're allowed to go ahead. Rashi Tosfot the Rashba hold there that you're allowed to go ahead and prepare this type of water on Yom Tov if you need to drink it, at least part of that. So then, if you wish, you can use the rest of the water to do what? To wash your face, your hand, your feet. ובית הלל מתירים. בית הלל said no, you can use the water even if not for the for the sake of drinking, just for the facial hand and feet. We are speaking in the Mishnah for washing the entire body, which means if he's doing a shower, right, but he's not ducking himself, he's just doing shower with the water that prepared in advance for Friday, but that's not speak about the entire body. The high Tanahu, that's according to Rabbi Shimon the Tanya. We learn in Tosefta, Lo yishtatef adam kol gufo ben lechamim ben metzonen. A person should not wash himself regardless if it's hot or cold. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that what Rabbi Meir hold when it was Gzerat Mechatzaot, it's apply the entire body, to wash the entire body, regardless if you do it toward taking shower or partially, regardless if it's hot and cold. That's what the Tosfot said. So there are those who hold that it's because it's Marit Ayin. How do you say Marit Ayin? Like people will see you and they think one thing and you doing another thing, which they feel that you like you hit the water on Shabbat, etc. That's the Ran opinion. So so when you use the chamin, it's even applied to prepare in advance. So that's one school of thought. Another, Rabbi Yehuda Omer bechamin asur betzunen mutar, which means you cannot use a hot water even it's with water that prepared on Friday. However, in the cold water you can do that. So again, what we understand so far, that we are speaking about cold water that you can use but not hot. אמר חיסדא מחלוקת בכלי, אבל בקרקע דברי הכל מותר. When it's come to washing the entire body in the water that it's prepared on Friday night, that's apply only to water that it's in the kli, like for example the pool that you use for the mikveh. So then you can use it on Shabbat. But other than that, no. So again, what we said of Rav Ovadia, Rav Ovadia, for example, allowed to use a mikveh with water that prepared on Friday, hot water that prepared in advance, okay? והמעשה דאנשי טבריה בקרקע עבה ואסרו לרבנן. What the story of the people in Tiberias, that applied to the ground, that those water that it's come from a spring water, they come out to the ground. So therefore the rabbis forbid to use that in Shabbat because it was heated by the spring water, and that's applied to washing the body from that water. אלא אי יתמר אחי יתמר מחלוקת בקרקע, אבל בכלי דברי הכל אסור. The different opinion apply to water that come in the ground, but water that it's in a vessel, everyone said that you cannot use it to take a shower on Shabbat. אמר רבא בר חנא אמר ביוחנן הלכה כרבי יהודה, which means that you cannot take a shower on Shabbat with hot water, even that hot water prepared on Friday, but you can do it with the cold water. So the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah said that that's specifically with the hot water, even hot water that is not under the category of Yad Soledet. Yad Soledet meaning you touch the water and you jump out, it's too hot, right? So and the Mishnah Berurah said even not with the Poshrim. The Shmirat Shabbat elaborate what exactly applied to Poshrim, what exactly that level of warm water but not hot water. So what do we understand? Do you understand it directly from Rabbi Yochanan, or you derive from what he said? My klala, what exactly Rabbi Yosef said? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi, kol makom she'ta motze shnei chalukin. Every time you find two Tanaic rabbis that disagree, אחד ואחד מכריע, הלכה כדברי המחר. Remember the 13th principle of Rabbi Ishmael? So the 13th one we said every morning is when you have 3 sources, you go by the 3rd one, right? The 3rd pasuk. So here it's the same apply to, you have 2 Tanaim that disagree, you come 3rd one and give opinions, so you go by the 3rd one. It's called הלכה כדברי המכריע. You go by the 3rd one to make decisions, like you have rabbinic court, you have 3, so you go by the 3rd, is a break even, right? חוץ מכולי מטלניות, which means you use a special small matlaniyot is a small towel that you use it for the, you call it in Polish shmate, like those
a rag or
rags, you know, that use it for the something that שאף על פי שרבי אליעזר מחמיר ורבי יהושע מקל ורבי עקיבא מכריע. Rabbi Eliezer is strict, Rabbi Yehoshua is lenient, Rabbi Akiva came the 3rd one and he rules. אין הלכה כדברי המחריע. We don't go there. So again, this we now enter to a new domain, which is a question in Tumah and Tara when you have a situation, the 2 opinion, and you go by the 3rd one, but here you do not go by the 3rd one. Other than this situation, every place else, we go by the 3rd one. Chada, the reason is the Rabbi Akiva Talmidu, because Rabbi Akiva was the student of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, so he cannot come in the 3rd opinion and make decision in something that is in a disputation between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. ועוד, in the Matlaniyot, הדר ברבי עקיבא לרבי יהושע. The Rabbi Akiva changed his mind and he followed Rabbi Yehoshua that is more lenient. כל שבא בחמין, this is the Rambam in הלכות Shabbat chapter 9 and also Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 318. Any salted food item that was already placed in hot water with regard to soaking dry food that was completely cooked before Shabbat, it is permitted to soak it in hot water on Shabbat. It is permitted to pour hot water from a secondary vessel and to food that was not cooked before Shabbat. However, the Magen Avraham said it is prohibited to pour hot water from a primary vessel that was actually on the fire at one point. The Rema said rinsing old salted fish known as kolyas, that's what the Gemara said, what's like from Spain, right? And the like in hot water completes its preparation because it cannot be eaten without being rinsed, and consequently it is prohibited to do so on Shabbat, but it's permitted to do it with the cold hot water. Now we discuss also today in regard to בישול בחמה ובתולדותיה, cooking in a hot sun or anything that is derivative from hot sun. So again, this is the Rambam in הלכות Shabbat chapter 9. He said cooking and heating food in the heat of the sun itself are permitted on Shabbat. On the contrary, cooking and heating food in a derivative of the sun, for example, if you use a clothing or things like that, sand or road dust heated in the sun, is prohibited. Even leaving food in a derivative of the sun before Shabbat to be heated during Shabbat is prohibited by rabbinic decree, as the opinion of the rabbis we mentioned in the Gemara. We also learned the halachot of washing body and using certain water. So we said we speak about water that was heated on a festival. כחמין שהוא חמו ביום טוב. Rambam, הלכות יום טוב, chapter 1, and also Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 5:11. Heating water on a festival, Yom Tov, for use in washing one's face, hands, and feet is permitted. That's also the Mishnah Brura. Heating water to wash one's entire body is prohibited, as the opinion of Beit Hillel. How about to rinse one's entire body on Shabbat? להשתתף בהן כל גופו. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 3:26 said, rinsing one's entire body with hot water on Shabbat is prohibited, whether the water was heated on Shabbat or before Shabbat. However, doing so in cold water is permitted as per opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and ruling of Rabbi Yochanan. So what we understand from that, when it's come to bathing water, and that's the last halakhat for today, rechitza b'Shabbat, bathing on Shabbat. So here the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 326 said as follows: it is prohibited to bath in hot water on Shabbat, even if the water was heated on Friday. It is permitted to bath in the hot spring of Tiberias water collected in the ground, but not in water collected in a vessel. So again, what we understand, if you go and you want to go to a mikveh, if you are Hasid and you want to go to mikveh on Saturday, so if the water was heated in advance before Shabbat and you're not bathing with that water, it's just a warm water that because it was heated before Shabbat but nothing on Shabbat itself, and you're not washing your body like bathing, you're just ducking as a mikveh. Some rabbis allow that for using as a mikveh, again with the condition you don't heat the water on Shabbat. It's prepared in advance and it's a warming water, but it's not fully hot water. We're not talking about locking the mikveh, locking the tub fully before Shabbat, and then you have smoke coming out, and then that's forbidden. But if the water is warming water, with the water that was fully cooked or prepared in advance, and you do not do anything, neither electric nor gas or anything on Shabbat, therefore you, by some poskim, not everyone, by some poskim you can go ahead and use that mikveh on Shabbat. Hashem